Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on what time you're watching this video. I'm Wayne, and this is my wife, Dawn, and you are joining us for what is going to be the first of many sessions of relationship advice with Dawn and Wayne. We would say Wayne and Dawn, Dawn and Wayne, it doesn't matter. I just think DAW is a better shortcut. Okay. So, we are going to cover some relationship advice information, not just for married couples, but for single individuals, for people dating, anyone that is in a relationship. That concludes your relationship with the Lord. It's not just going to cover relationship information with individuals, but you'll find that the information that covers between an individual or between two individuals uh, will relate one to yourself and also to another person, but also will relate to your Heavenly Father as well as how to relate to other people. So we're going to be covering, first of all, with a book that we just loved, and we decided to go back and read through it again and wanted to cover that with y'all first, is The Five Love Languages. Here it is. Written by Mr. Gary Chapman, and he does a great job of outlining a whole lot of points that we want to cover. We're just going to cover one chapter right now. We're not going to be reading this thing word for word. We're going to kind of skim through what the chapter's about and give you guys some highlights uh, and information and our takes on it for what we found as the things that were stood out to us in our notes. I would encourage anyone that is watching, if you have questions about the relationship information or anything that we cover, if you have questions about it, put it down in the comments, and we will check the comments later, and then maybe be able to go back and answer those questions either in the comments or to you on another video. But we want to be able to make sure that it's as interactive as we can possibly get it, being that we're going to be recording these things in advance and then posting them, so people have a chance to be able to go back and get into them and kind of read them and hear them when they want to. So we're going to start off with chapter 1, Five Love Languages. And like I said, there are many other books that we're going to cover. If you actually enjoy what we first do with this one and you want to get the book as well, you can find them at bookstores, Amazon, wherever you find and get your books and information from. This book has been sold over 1 million copies worldwide, I believe, and you can find this book just about everywhere.
First, I want to encourage you, get the book for yourself, read it for yourself, um, as well as going to fivelovelanguages.com and doing their love language profile so that you can find out what your love language is. Um, so we'll be starting off with chapter 1.
In chapter 1, Mr. Chapman is on a plane, and he's talking about in chapter 1 about a gentleman that's sitting next to him that basically has a lot of questions. And he asks him quite a few questions about marriage and how it works and how it lasts and everything like that. And so we're going to get into that and kind of break down some of what he's talking about there. So that is the first part of chapter 1, and you go right ahead.
So the guy basically describes he's been married 3 times and was divorced 3 times due to the fact that they no longer loved each other. And so he's asking Mr. Chapman, what happens to love after the wedding? He said, is his experience common? Is that why we have so many divorces in our country? I can't believe that it happened to me 3 times. And those who don't divorce, do they learn to live with the emptiness? Or does love really stay alive in some marriages? If so, how? Yeah, he goes on to he asks those questions because he's serious. He wants to figure out if he's doing something wrong, what is it? Because he feels like he felt like he was doing everything right, but he couldn't understand why they weren't
Reciprocating.
yes, to his actions and different things.
And one of the things that Mr. Chapman says, and I highlighted this, I want to read it word for word on it because I don't want to speak what he said. He says sometimes the answers are couched in psychological research jargon that is almost incomprehensible. Sometimes they are couched in humor and folklore. Most of the jokes and pithy sayings contain some truth, but they are like offering an aspirin to a person with cancer. So, like you've heard all the comedians talk and joke about how their wife is or how their husband is, and this is that and it's always a good funny laugh and things like that. And they comedians pick up on their spouses, but he's saying even in that there's some truth and the answers for what this gentleman was asking, there's some truth in those things, even though they're meant for comedy. But it's like saying, okay, well, here's your answer, but it's like a person with cancer, and you say, well, here's an aspirin, and does that really help them? No, it doesn't really help them, and it's lacking the truth and the knowledge that the person needs in order to actually successfully move forward with the relationship to better that relationship.
It also says the desire for romantic love in marriage is deeply rooted in our psychological makeup. Um, Something else that I have learned is that sometimes your love language can also depend on how you were raised. Um, if you were lacking physical touch as a kid, like you didn't have parents that would hug you or, be very touching, like hug you, hold your hand, pat you on the back, different things like that, then as an adult, your love language could possibly be physical touch. Um, and then moving on to um, the truth we're missing, the problem we overlook is that people speak different love languages.
And says, with all the help available from media experts, why is it that so few couples seem to have found the secret to keeping love alive after the wedding? So, with everything that's out there, with all of the information that's available, why is it that we have such a high divorce rate? Why is there so many people um, falling out into different categories of, well, what's the word they use for in court? Irreconcilable differences. What would be considered irreconcilable and an irreconcilable difference in order to make your marriage fall apart so bad that you weren't able to actually talk to your partner about it to work out the issues? There are different things and different answers for that, and just kind of breaking the iceberg here, but let's go on.
The answer to most of those questions is the purpose of this book. It is not that the books and articles already published are not helpful. The problem is that we have overlooked one fundamental truth: people speak different love languages. Your emotional love language and the language of your spouse may be as different as Chinese from English. No matter how hard you try to express love in English, if your spouse understands only Chinese, you will never understand how to love each other. Being sincere is not enough. We must be willing to learn our spouse's primary love language if we are to be effective communicators of love. It says, are you and your spouse speaking the same language? Not just your spouse, but anyone you have a close relationship with. If we want to be effective communicators of love, we have to learn their primary love language. Expressing love is only limited by your imagination.
True. And I had my notes on that particular subject here. It says, with all the help available and all the media, that's where we were last picking up at. It says people are looking in the wrong places for their answers. The answers that they need, they seek quick fixes. They seek gimmicks, shortcuts to a long, satisfying relationship. But there are no shortcuts in a long-lasting, loving marriage. Communication is the key to any relationship. But if you are not speaking a language that the other person understands, things just become more difficult and confusing. We then cherry pick a few of the ideas from and try them out, and when they don't work, we give up. He mentions how there are a lot of these quick fix ideas out there about, oh, here's 101 different things that you can try with your spouse or with your significant other. And he talks about how people will go and get, oh, let me try, I'll try this, and this, and maybe I'll try that. And they'll try those few things. And when they do those things and their significant other does not respond in the way that they expect them to respond, then they just give up because they say, oh, well, this is 101 things that were supposed to have worked. Well, I tried 5 of them. That didn't work. I bought her flowers. I gave her candy. Well, candy probably would work with her. But
candy works. Flowers,
I
appreciate it, but I could really care less about flowers.
That's because that's not her love language. I think Mr. Chapman might have missed one specific love language, and maybe make it 6 love languages because food falls under the category for this one here. So, but her love language is completely different than giving gifts. And gift giving is one of the love languages that he has in the book. But it's not Don's, and I know that. Don's love language does not fall under gift giving. It does not fall under quality time. And we've both taken our test, and we will share our results with you guys in a minute. But the love languages that your partner speaks, that your spouse or boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever is speaking, is going to be how you need to communicate to that person.
Even your children, you can apply this to your children as well, and it will also build a stronger relationship between you and your children, or even people close to you. If not that you're like in a friendship type of way as well, because if you know their love languages, you know how to reach them better. You know how to understand them better. You know where they're coming from when they're trying to vent or trying to see if they did something wrong. You can kind of gauge based on their love language the type of person that they are and what they need.
So it's not necessarily a vibe that you have with someone specifically. It's that they understand your language. They speak your language. And that's why you get along so well with them. And you may actually in time have learned to speak their language, which is why the relationship is reciprocated. And so your best friend might be like the person who does everything and says everything right to you. But you try to figure out, then, why does my girlfriend not say the right things to me? Or why does my wife not say the right things to me? But yet my best friend always comes out and says the exact things that I need to hear, and always enforces and supports me in the right way. And it makes me feel like, man, if you were a woman, it's like, no. The thing is that he's speaking a language that you understand, and that your wife particularly isn't, because she doesn't understand that that's your language is communication. And a specific type of communication, I guess, is what you're needing. So those things are words of affirmation. So we wanted to make sure that people are understanding where is your love language. And if you do, like she said earlier, if you go to 5lovelanguages.com, go on there and take the test that you can take, you'll find out it's like 5 minutes, maybe. I think it says like it'll take 15 minutes or something to do. I think I took it in 5. You just go through and answer the questions. When you answer the questions, it'll give you what your primary love language is. You'll also then have an option to choose, if you want to pay for the premium service, which will unlock the rest of it, which will give you your sub love language or your secondary love language. But once you know your primary love language right then and there, that actually tells you more than just a handful of things. It tells you a lot about yourself and will help you understand why it is certain people communicate better to you and why it is that certain people do not communicate well with you. And so moving on.
Are you speaking a foreign language? Identifying and learning their love language is the key to a long-lasting and loving relationship. In order to keep love alive, you will have to put forth the effort to learn another love language. The important thing is to speak the love language of your spouse. We tend to speak our primary love language and we become confused when our spouse does not understand what we are communicating. We are expressing our love, but the message does not come through because we are speaking what to them is a foreign language. Once you identify and learn to speak your spouse's primary love language, I believe that you will have discovered the key to a lasting, loving marriage. Love need not evaporate after the wedding. But in order to keep it alive, most of us will have to put forth the effort to learn a secondary love language.
I like this quote here, and so I highlighted this point as well. Love need not evaporate after the wedding. This was something that the gentleman had said to him specifically on the plane. That while they were talking, like this seems like after the wedding, like everything before the wedding was great, everything was just outstanding, but after the wedding, it just went away, like it just evaporated. And so he says, yeah, love need not evaporate after the wedding. He says we need to be willing to put in the work, though. And my note for this is exactly that. We need to be willing to put in the work that's going to take in order to keep that love alive. In order for you to continue loving someone, you have to continue learning that person. As old as I am now, we've been married now for 12 years. Coming up on 13. We both change from since day one, since our dating time period, and they're doing things that are different about us now that weren't there when we first got married, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we stopped learning about one another, if we stopped learning about our little idiosyncrasies, as people say it, I guess is the word I'm looking for, the finer details of what makes me me and what makes her her. If we stop learning those things and stop doing what we do in order to stay connected to one another, then that love that we have for each other, eventually, yeah, I think it would probably evaporate and it would die because we're not putting in the work. We're not taking the time to one, communicate with each other, to two, take the time to learn one another and to continue knowing one another, not just in a physical way, but emotionally, spiritually, right down to your very core of your soul of who that person is. If you're going to get married and you want to spend the rest of your life with someone, you should be willing to put in the work to know who that person is from one day to the next. When they change, it's not a change that you go, oh, well, they changed and you're no longer the person I fell in love with. Okay, well, what was it that caused them to change? Well, was it a good change or a bad change? And if you consider it to be a bad change, then it's something that needs to be discussed and talked about. Mm-hmm. Communication is the key. Love is like a campfire, and this is my own personal quote, okay? But I say love is like a campfire in a blizzard. If you don't tend to the fire, the cold snow will snuff it out. Be aware. You know, if you're out there in the middle of nowhere and you light a fire, the wind comes along and stops you from lighting that fire. Once you get the fire going, you've got to tend the fire in order to keep it up. Otherwise, your fire blows out.
Mm-hmm. You got to pay attention. You got to participate. And like he said, communication. You have to talk everything. Like one of our good friends says, everything's a conversation. You have to be present. If you're not present, if you just go to work and you come home and you just watch TV in the evenings and you don't be present in the moment with your spouse or your children, or if you're hanging out with friends but you're on your phone instead of engaging in conversation, or like if us and our friends, we like to play games. So if you're on your phone instead of playing
the game that everyone's playing,
then you're not engaging, you're not participating, you're not being present.
So our languages that we discovered, and we already knew this because we did this 12 years ago, more than 12 years ago.
We did this as a premarital counseling. Before we got married, this was one of the books that our pastor had encouraged us to read before we got married.
Probably one of the best books Pastor Melkees has ever told us to buy. And honestly, between this one and one other one we will be covering at a later time, Hurt people.
No, healing for damaged
Healing
emotions.
for damaged emotions.
But that quote is in there.
Yeah. But I loved hurt people. But so we will get to that one eventually too. That was one of the ones
that quote was in Healing for Damaged Emotions.
I know, but then we got the book. Never mind.
Hurt People's not a book.
It was in there.
No, it's a quote in Healing for Damaged Emotions.
Are you sure?
Yes.
I could have swore we have that book.
No.
Okay, well, we're gonna have to.
There.
So we'll have to go back through.
We're
gonna have to go back through that because that book itself was a very good book, and it helped us shape a lot of things in our marriage before we even got married. We were able to sit down, talk out, discuss all of the issues that we had with one another that could possibly come up.
Healing for Damaged Emotions helped us set boundaries in our marriage.
Before the marriage.
Before we got married. It helped us understand what we were willing to work through and what we were not.
Things that were considered acceptable and things that were not acceptable.
Yeah.
Like, okay, fine. It's like, is this going to be a game changer? Is this going to be a deal breaker? Yes, this is a deal breaker for me. Okay, is this a deal breaker for you? Yes, it is. Okay, things we agreed upon. There were things we didn't agree upon. But things we didn't agree upon, again, it was a conversation. We talk things out. So, okay, well, let's, we come to some common ground with it and we work that out. Plain and simple.
Yep. So, my love language is physical touch, and what it gave me about it is this love language isn't all about the bedroom. A person whose primary love language is physical touch is not surprisingly very touchy. Physical touch fosters a sense of security and belonging in any relationship. Your needs: hugs, pats on the back, holding hands, and thoughtful touches on the arm, shoulder, or face. They can all be ways to show excitement, concern, care, and love. Physical presence and accessibility are crucial. What hurts? Physical neglect or abuse can be unforgivable and destructive.
So, for all of you people who know us and always see us walking around, bumping into each other, or like we're sitting on this tiny couch right now next to each other, this is not an issue. This is what helps keep our marriage strong. Okay? This is one of the things that helps keep our marriage strong. I know that her love language is physical touch. So I walk up behind her, I grab her hand and walk through a crowd or guide her through some places where we're walking around. It's because she wants that. Not because I'm controlling. It's because that's what she likes. Okay. My particular love language is quality time. Okay. And in that it says, in the vernacular of quality time, nothing says I love you like full and undivided attention. Your needs. Being there for this type of person is critical, but really being there with the TV off, fork and knife down, and all chores and tasks on standby makes your significant other feel truly special and loved. What hurts? Distractions, postponed dates, or the failure to listen can be especially hurtful. Now, I'll agree with most of that, except for when it comes to where it says, with the TV off and the fork and knife down. Some of the best quality time we've had together has been sitting in front of our TV watching a movie or playing video games, or going out to eat someplace and just spending time together, just the two of us, having a meal. And I felt like those were some of the best days and some of the best dates we've had, is when we're able to do that. And we're not able to do it often, but I think we were able to do it often enough where I'm satisfied.
So this kind of proves the point of over time you change. Because when we first got married, his primary love language was words of affirmation. And his secondary love language was quality time. And here we are almost 13 years later, and he's flopped. He is now primary quality time. And I'm pretty sure that your secondary
words of affirmation would be. Yeah, because the way they have it listed here, I would think that's exactly the direction it went.
Yeah.
So.
But in the beginning of our marriage, I was being more intentional on making sure that he understood that I appreciated the things he did, that I respected him for the person that he is, that I was proud of all the hard work that he was putting in during those times. And I made sure that I showed appreciation or spoke appreciation for when he helped with something around the house that I didn't get a chance to get to, or anything like that. I tried to be very intentional about that. And now I have noticed that it's a lot easier for me to give him quality time because I am physical touch. I have to be there with him to touch him to feel better for me to feel better. And in doing so, I'm providing quality time at the same time.
So what recharges her batteries is also recharging my batteries. And so originally, when we first got married, I didn't understand the whole physical touch thing. And so she would jump me when I would come through the door from work and, like, oh, you're home, and come give me a hug and everything. And I'm like, can I get through the door first? Can I sit down and decompress for a minute? And and it would bother me. And then the one time that she didn't do it after a few weeks of us being married, and I was like, okay, is something wrong? I was like, this is unusual. I mean, usually I get tackled at the door.
Wait, you gotta explain that a little more, okay? So I guess he had a hard day at work or whatever that day was, and he got upset with me, and he goes, would you stop doing that when I come through the door? He goes, I would like a minute to decompress. And I was like, oh, okay, fine. And so the next day, I didn't do that. I forced myself to sit on the bed in the room and not greet him at the door. And then he comes walking through the door and he's like, is something wrong? You didn't greet me at the door. And I'm like, heifer, you said you wanted a minute to decompress before I greeted you. And now you're saying... I was like, I need you to make up your mind. But then when we sat down and we talked about it, he was like, I got used to you greeting me at the door. He goes, yesterday was just a hard day and I was just frustrated. And he goes, and I didn't mean to take it out on you. Now I was like, okay, see, so that's where the conversations come into place, because I was thinking he didn't like it. He didn't like me, I guess, showing my primary love language.
But for me, it was also a little odd because I wasn't used to that much physical touch. And so I was like, okay, like you have to like be up under me 24/7. Is that just a thing? Like, I don't understand. Like, I understand needy people, but goodness gracious, it was really kind of odd. And this had gone on for several weeks actually before we got to before I got to the breaking point of telling you that. Mm-hmm. And then that following day, I had a worse day at work, and I was like, well, at least I'll get to get home and, get through the door and Don will be there to greet me, and things will just be better. And I got home and she didn't greet me, and I was like, okay, what's going on? And it really did. It really threw me off. And we had that conversation afterwards, which made things better. And we were able to talk it out and understand where each other was coming from and how things were better for the way it was, not trying to make it better the way that I was seeing it. But in either case, it's like, okay, a little space, but I don't mind you coming to greet me at the door, because sometimes when I come through, I just need a hug. I just need to know that I'm loved and someone actually cares about me, because
your job don't.
Yeah, the job doesn't. It didn't show me any love. So but yeah, so that brings us actually to the end of chapter 1. Mm-hmm. And anything else that you wanted to?
I just wanted to leave him with this question.
Okay.
And what we want to leave you with to think over is, how does your spouse respond when you try to show affection? That's it.
Okay. Well, I think that covers it, and we are going to sign off right now, guys. But we will be back at you next week, probably about the same time. I think we're still trying to work out the bugs and details on when we're gonna put these out, but hopefully everything will process out correctly, and we'll be getting out maybe one a week of these. Lord say the same. Creek don't rise. But honestly, this is something that we're not doing for likes and for all that stuff. This is something God put on our heart several years ago to do, and we've been hard-headed. Yep. And we were not wanting to do it because neither of us like being in front of the camera. As most people know, we work behind the cameras at the church, and that's where we like to be. And so being in front of the camera is not one of the places that either of us really particularly like to be at. So this was a difficult thing, and so we were really stepping out of our comfort zone to set this up and to go forward with this. But we know that this is something that God has said for us to do, and so we are going to do it, and going to do it to the best of our ability. I definitely appreciate the time. If anyone is still watching this video, we appreciate it. I know this has been a long one, and we try not to keep them this long. Hopefully maybe we can race it down to like 15 minutes or so instead of a 30-minute long video. But we thank you again for your time, and we'll see you next week. Any questions, comments, please leave them in the comments below, and we'll get back to you either in the video or online. Thank you. Bye.